Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, June 18th, 2026. My dear friend Mohammad Marandi, Professor Marandi, joins us from Tehran. Professor Marandi, always a pleasure, my dear friend. Before we get into the ins and outs of how this agreement came about and how the Iranians managed to get concessions from the Americans, isn't it pretty much a historical fact that the winner of a war writes the peace agreement that ends the war?
Well, Judge, thank you very much for inviting me. First, I should stress that Iranians have no hostility towards the American people. I certainly don't. I was born in the United States. I went to school in the United States until after the revolution, where I went to Iran, and I know that the political establishment, the media in the United States likes to say that they chant death to America in Iran. Those chants are about the empire. They're not. They should never be taken literally. It's about death to the empire, death to an empire that supports genocide in Gaza and Lebanon, that supports war. But it has nothing to do with American people. It's like Yankee go home. It doesn't mean that an American citizen who has a passport, that those protesters mean that they should go home. It means that the empire should be dismantled, and the United States should deal with its own issues. I think that to a large degree, that is what happened, and that this deal was a deal which reflected Iran's victory on the battlefield, 39 days of war. It's not just that Iran survived the war. It is that they hit back 24 hours a day at the Israeli regime, at U.S. bases, and whenever its infrastructure was targeted, it would strike at U.S. assets or U.S. allies in the region that were complicit in the war. Then when Trump initiated the siege campaign to starve Iran, and we saw senators go on television gloating about how Iranians had no food to eat, which was not true, but in any case, it caused difficulty for ordinary Iranians. But Iran won the siege warfare as well, and that's why Trump became increasingly desperate for a deal. And we saw that in his speech last night, where he spoke of oil reserves running out in 4 weeks and so on. So Iran, obviously, when they win on the battlefield and when they win in siege warfare, and Iran and its allies, of course, the axis of resistance, then they're going to win at the negotiating table as well. The hope is that the United States will do the right thing and implement the deal and prevent Netanyahu and the Zionists and the Zionist lobby from wrecking this agreement. And right now, as we speak, the Israeli regime has bombed Lebanon. It's bombing the city of Nabatea and other areas. It wants to crash the agreement. And of course, we have now 1,000 Palestinians murdered in Gaza since Trump's ceasefire. In other words, ever since that ceremony that they had in Egypt, where all these regional leaders came and endorsed Trump and endorsed this utterly unfair so-called peace agreement or this ceasefire, 1,000 Palestinians have been murdered. Children, women, innocent people every day. And it's not even in the news anymore. Western news just ignores it and it has moved on. So hopefully the United States and recognize the precarious situation for the global economy and the U.S. economy, at least for their own sake, the U.S. government, if not, obviously not for the Palestinians or for the Lebanese, otherwise they wouldn't have allowed all this genocide to take place. But for the sake of their own people and the U.S. economy and the global economy, that they will not allow Netanyahu to wreck this deal, because there's no doubt that right now Netanyahu and the Zionist lobby in the United States and the Israeli regime are plotting to wreck this agreement.
So instead of the unconditional surrender demanded many times by President Trump, the Iranians emerged from a confrontation with the world's greatest military power with much to celebrate. Fair summary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's and I think this is because the United States simply does not understand Iran. The Western media, American media, Western think tanks, American think tanks, Western and American elites, they have created a narrative of Iran, a caricature of Iran for 47 years now. And they believe that they believe in that narrative, and they carry out policies based on the narrative that they've built. And that's why they're always hitting a brick wall. The Iran that I live in is completely different from the Iran that you hear about in the Western media. Every time some are mutual friends of ours, and hopefully one day you'll come to Tehran and see for yourself. But mutual friends of ours, every time, every one of them, when they come to Iran for the first time, they're always shocked, literally shocked. I'm not exaggerating, at the difference between what they've heard before coming to Iran about the country and what they experience in the country. And that's because there's such a detachment between reality and Western narratives, because Western media is controlled. Western think tanks are owned by the powerful, the Epstein elite, the neocons, the Zionists, the oligarchs, whatever you want to call them. And that is what blocks the two countries from being able to better understand each other. I mentioned once before a book called Going to Tehran by Flint and Hillary Leverett. These two very wonderful people, Hillary Jewish, Flint Catholic like yourself, they worked in the White House. They were officials in Bush's White House. Flint Leverett resigned over the Iraq War, being a very principled person, and Hillary, like him, a very principled person. They wrote this book on Iran, and despite their status, they were totally marginalized and antagonized, and no longer, they were basically no longer relevant in the bubble of Washington politics because they took a principled stand, and all they said is that the United States is misunderstanding Iran, and the United States has to move towards rapprochement. Otherwise, we're going to have a dangerous situation. And here we are today, because the elites accepted, rather than accepting their reality narratives, they waged two wars on Iran. On both occasions, they failed. They pushed the global economy towards catastrophe.
Right.
And even now, as we speak, they're conspiring to wreck the deal.
Isn't this 14 points, which was finally revealed yesterday when some American official in Evian, France, read it out loud? And according to one of the New York Times reporters who was in the room when it was being read out loud, after each point articulated his own defense of the point from the Trump perspective. But isn't it true that these 14 points are essentially the same 14 points that were proposed by the Iranians in April, the ones that Trump initially accepted, and then after he read it, ripped up, according to his press secretary, threw in the trash can, now bear his signature? Am I right?
The 10-point plan that the Iranians proposed for the on, I think, the 38th or 39th day or the 37th day of the war, which Trump accepted as the framework for negotiations, is in many ways similar to this. And while there are some changes, but in general, they are the same. And I've seen your program with other colleagues and friends, and many of the things that we've seen in this today, you've discussed on your program a month ago, or
right.
Almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago. Most of this was already in place, but there was resistance, and the resistance only led to the global economic situation becoming worse. In other words, if the United States had accepted this 2 months ago, or 1 month ago, or 2 weeks ago, it would have been far better for the global economy than now. And right now, I think it's still unclear what's going to happen. I think the months ahead are going to be very, very difficult because the shortages are just beginning to hit. Right now, we see basically the inflation, but the reality of the crisis is far greater than just inflation.
So resumption of oil sales, lifting of sanctions, return of seized bank accounts, geographic integrity, sovereignty over Hormuz with Oman, a $300 billion reconstruction fund, and at the end of the second round of negotiations, U.S. troops go home. Is there celebration in Tehran?
No, I don't think there's going to be celebration anytime soon because no one really believes anything that comes from Washington. And the Iranians know that they have to be very tough in the days and weeks ahead. In Lebanon, we know that the Israeli regime has no intention, if they can, to leave. But Iran is adamant that without the sovereignty of Lebanon restored and without the end of the terror of the Israeli regime in Lebanon, we cannot have a deal. And the first phase even will not end with success unless resolved. And during the negotiations over the next few weeks, the issue of Gaza is going to be a part of it. Iran is not going to accept Netanyahu continuing to slaughter the Gazans, the Israelis to continue to slaughter Gazans every day until they're just wiped out, and as the Western media looks away. So the issue of Gaza, in order for us to have success, it has to be resolved. The issue of Lebanon, because it's very explicit because of the genocidal war that we've seen in Lebanon over the past few weeks, this has to be resolved very swiftly.
Well, Lebanon is mentioned 3 times in the agreement, even though the Americans, before the agreement was released, indicated it wasn't. So 2 things. One, as we speak, the IDF is bombing Lebanon. But secondly, here's Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's the rough equivalent of the head of the Israeli FBI, making some of the most outrageous, horrific statements that a war crimes accused can make. Chris, cut number 22.
Should Israel continue to act contrary to the principles of the United States? Continue to act contrary to the principles of the United States? Yes, because we are an independent country and we cannot stop destroying homes in southern Lebanon. Can't stop, cannot let the population in southern Lebanon come back. This puts our soldiers at risk. This puts our residents at risk. We must not let them go back to the borders and return to what was before the 7th of October. And we must continue to control the territory. Also contrary to President Trump's opinion.
What is Trump going to do about this? Or what are the Iranians going to do about it?
Well, Trump is not going to do anything about it unless the Iranians force him to do something. And the Iranians last night were close to firing missiles at the Israeli regime. The Iranian Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, military headquarters, issued a statement, and Iran cleared the skies of Western Iran. But they held back for the time being. But at the end of the day, if there's going to be normalization in the Strait of Hormuz, if there's going to be, if the Americans want Iran to refrain from striking the Israeli regime, this is going to have to stop. We are dealing with the most abnormal people on this planet, the most vicious and violent. I mean, in human history, we've seen all sorts of horrific crimes across the globe, but never before have these crimes been broadcast on a daily basis, 24 hours a day for almost 3 years. And the perpetrators of those crimes gloat about it and brag about it. And then you see Western media looking away or justifying these crimes, and Western leaders supporting these criminals. After almost 3 years, Judge, the Israeli regime has no real sanctions at all. In fact, the Western support continues to flow in, financial support, military support. But Iran has been under maximum sanctions for decades now. And it has survived 3 wars that were instigated by the United States. The United States supported Saddam Hussein, encouraged him to attack Iran. The same Arab countries that supported this war also supported Saddam Hussein back then. And the 2 wars in the last couple of years. I remember last year when you and I spoke, it was, I think, 2 days ago, last year, I was on your show. The building that I was in was a part of the Iranian radio and TV. And another building that belonged to the Iranian National Radio and Television was bombed right before we spoke.
Yes.
But none of the journalists in the United States, none of the Western media. I mean, they murdered 250 Palestinian journalists. They've murdered many Lebanese journalists, a couple of them who I knew from Al Mayadeen TV, but nothing from the Western media. So the Iranians know that the only way that they're going to be able to stop this is through the leverage that they have. And Iran right now has a lot of leverage. And by the way, Judge, something that Zionists, if any Zionist, I don't know why any Zionist would watch your show, but if a Zionist is watching this show, as the key concessions were given to Iran as a result of Netanyahu's bombing of Dahi and Beirut. The last time when he bombed, the Iranians said we're going to hit back hard. And then Trump, in order to prevent the negotiations from collapsing and having more war and moving closer to the cliff, the global economic crisis, he gave key concessions to Iran, including about Lebanon and also ending the siege. So Zionists should go and blame Netanyahu for some of what we see in the text today.
Here's President Trump articulating just what you said. They bombed Beirut the last minute while he was trying to decide whether or not to sign the agreement. Chris, cut number 18.
I'll tell you what, Israel's fighting Hezbollah too long and too many people are being killed. And you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody, because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah, that I can tell you. And I suggested to Israel to let Syria take care of Hezbollah. Because to be honest with you, I think they do a better job of doing it. I didn't like where 2 hours before we're signing the agreement that there was an attack in Lebanon, in Beirut. It wasn't like in the southern side, and it was in Beirut. I did not like that. I let them know that. I didn't like it, not at all.
I wonder what the conversations between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are like today. Netanyahu once boasted that the U.S. reports to me on a daily basis. I wonder what they're reporting today. I mean, this is the type of agreement. This is what happens when the President of the United States sends two real estate agents to negotiate with one of the most sophisticated diplomats, Prime Minister Arachi, in the world. This is the end result.
Judge, one of the things that I find extraordinary now is that the Democrats, instead of blaming Trump for carrying out this war and just saying, let's end it, now they're criticizing the agreement. What is the agreement but ending a siege on ordinary Iranians? What is it but handing over Iranian assets that were stolen? What is it about waiving sanctions on Iranian oil and energy exports? The Democrats are, when now that Trump wants to end this injustice under duress, but now they're calling this a horrible deal. So when we look at it, we see that both parties, or at least the elites in both parties, they're all controlled by the same oligarchy, the same Zionist lobby, the same people who are pushing the entire global economy over a cliff. So we'll have to see how things play out. But one would think that at least the Democrats would take a more sane position and say, okay, let's just finish this and end the war and let the global economy recover, and let's stop the slaughter in Lebanon and the slaughter in Gaza. But apparently that's not an issue for them. What is important for them is to keep the stranglehold on ordinary Iranians.
I think you're 100% correct. But Professor Marandi, according to President Trump, you're not going to believe this, so we'll play it. Israel's actually happy. Watch this. Cut number 1, Chris.
Many countries all over the world are so. Every country. I think Israel too. Look, think of what Israel's getting. they're not going to be nuked. It's very simple. I told Bibi, your biggest risk was that they'd drop a nuclear weapon into the middle of Israel. They'd only need one, and there would be no more Israel. Think of it, Bibi. You got the best, the most important thing that you were asking for is that. So I think they're happy.
Answers the question about whether or not he's spoken to Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think they're happy. He obviously has not spoken to them. Will the Iranian military strike Israel in retaliation for its continued invasion of Lebanon and Trump's inability or unwillingness to restrain them?
I think unless this stops, yes, it's going to be inevitable. The Iranians will strike. And as I said last night, they emptied the skies, and the missiles were prepared for launching, but at the last moment, probably because of negotiations or something, that promise made by the Americans, they withheld their fire. But it's going to happen, and also it's going to slow down or stop progress at the negotiating table. And we don't have time. I mean, if the Iranians are not going to allow the agreement to move forward, if the Americans don't carry out their obligations. And Netanyahu, and Trump has, theoretically speaking, Trump can stop the Israeli regime. They're completely dependent on Trump and the United States. But it is quite extraordinary how defiant and how unreasonable the Israeli regime is. They are pushing not only are they pushing the world towards financial misery, but they are biting the hand that fed them. Trump did more for the Israeli regime than anyone else. He illegally declared that the Golan Heights, which belongs to the Syrian people, to belong to the Israeli regime. Whom he moved the capital to Jerusalem, to Al-Quds, and he's supported the genocide, he's supported the slaughter, and then now the Israeli regime is doing everything that it can, them and their lobby, to undermine his agreement.
I'm going to play the clip of President Trump again, and I want you to watch the look on the face of Secretary Rubio. And
I knew you were going to say that.
Right. And Secretary Lutnick, both arch Zionists, as the president says, I think, no, Mr. Lutnick is the Secretary of Commerce. Rubio, of course, is the Secretary of State. But as the president says, I think they're happy. Watch the looks on their face. Watch Marco Rubio's inability to look at the camera. He's looking down at his shoes. And watch Secretary Lutnick shake his head. Number one, Chris.
Many countries all over the world are so, every country, I think Israel too. Look, think of what Israel's getting. They're not going to be nuked. It's very simple. I told Bibi, your biggest risk was that they'd drop a nuclear weapon into the middle of Israel. They'd only need one, and there would be no more Israel. Think of it, Bibi. You got the best, the most important thing that you were asking for is that. So I think they're happy.
Now, these two guys work for him, and they serve at his pleasure. One couldn't look at the audience. The other smiled and shook his head no.
Well, maybe you're misreading this. Maybe Rubio is looking at the shoes that Trump gave him and suddenly realizing that they really are too big for his feet. And
for those who don't know for those who don't know what you're talking about, this is literally true. President Trump gave black dress shoes to all of the males on his cabinet and in his inner circle because he wanted them to wear the same kind of shoe. This is not a farce. This is not a joke. This actually happened. Go ahead, Mohammed.
And then Lutnick, maybe he was shaking his head, remembering the fond memories that he had with Epstein. The Epstein that he never knew, of course. He only went to his house once, so he said, and then later on
brought his children with him
to the island. Boy. So maybe they were actually thinking of other things.
Yes. Professor Marandi, a pleasure, my dear man. Congratulations to you. I realize this isn't the end but it is the beginning of the end. And right now, the Americans and the Iranians were eyeball to eyeball, and Donald Trump blinked. All the best, Mohammed. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Judge. I really hope that I don't know what lies ahead. I know that the Zionists direct this, but I really hope that the American people and the Iranian people can move closer towards each other and to cast aside this ongoing conflict, because the people of the United States and the people of Iran don't deserve it. But thank you very much for inviting me, and God be with you.
Thank you. All the best. A full day for you with our heavy hitters coming up at 9 this morning. If you're watching us live in 34 minutes on all of this, Larry Johnson. At 2 o'clock this afternoon on all of this, Colonel Douglas McGregor. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, the Golden Boy, Max Blumenthal. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.